Are you tired of drafting wide receivers that just stress you the F out every week? If so, you've made it to the right video because today we're going to be revealing the safest wide receivers to draft in 2025. No disappearing acts, no hamstring horror stories, just reliable dudes that you can actually trust. Just think of them as the fantasy version of cargo shorts, right? They're not always flashy, but they always get the job done. That's right, Headliner Nation. Today we're going to be trying to find the safest wide receivers to draft in 2025 fantasy football. And we're going to continue to do it in a way that no one else does. We're going to be comparing 40 of the top fantasy wide receivers in the league against 8 different metrics that can help us predict safety when it comes to the wide receiver position in fantasy football. Now let's go ahead and pull up the metrics that we're going to be looking at here today. We're going to be looking at average games played. We need players that are actually on the field. Also going to be looking at targets per game. We need touches to score fantasy points. Wide receivers have a hard time getting receptions without targets, so that's what we're going to be looking at. How about target separation? That's the amount of distance between the player and the closest defender at the time of the target. That tries to help us locate guys that can actually get open. Then we're going to look at drop rate. What percentage of their targets did they drop? We got to be able to hold on to the football when we get the opportunity. Then we'll go down to yards after the catch per reception. Once they have the ball in their hands, what can they do with it? Then we'll look at red zone targets. Touchdowns are not predictable, but finding those wide receivers that rack up red zone targets assures us that we are at least looking at guys that have the most touchdown opportunity. We'll then look at their production when it comes to fantasy points per game, because who doesn't love more fantasy points? And then remember, cheaper is better. So we're looking for their 2025 ADP to find out who the best value is. So think of it as painting a complete picture. Guys who are on the field, getting targets, are open enough to make the catch without dropping it, and then doing something with it while having the most chances at touchdowns. We're then going to score each one of these players 1 to 40 in each metric. We want to put them all up against each other head to head. Now, after going through all 8 metrics, we're going to total up their scores and see who comes out with the highest overall score. But then we'll look at the list, discuss the potential positives and negatives facing them this year to determine whether or not they are still the safest targets. Now, obviously, rookie wide receivers cannot be included. How can someone be quote unquote safe if we've never seen them in the NFL before? And remember this as we go through today's show. We aren't trying to make a video telling you that the best wide receivers in the NFL are good picks. That is a waste of time. We are trying to find the cheaper options with similar metrics to those studs. And there are a couple names that I think might shock you here at the end of the video. But how do I know this process actually works? Thank you so much for asking. Well, when guys like Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Puka Nacua all finish inside the top 7 of this exercise, we know we're doing something right. So let's go ahead and start off by looking at the 40 wide receivers we're including in today's show. And let me rapid fire through these super fast. A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Calvin Ridley, CeeDee Lamb, Chris Godwin, Chris Olave, Cortland Sutton, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Smith, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, Jamar Chase, Jacoby Myers, Jameson Williams, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, Justin Jefferson, Khalil Shakir, Ladd McConkey, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Mike Evans, Nico Collins, Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice, Rashad Bateman, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill, Wan'Dale Robinson, Xavier Worthy, and Zay Flowers. Damn, I thought I was about to pass out right there in the middle of that list. So now that you know who's going to be included in this show, let's go ahead and start going through each metric. Now, it's hard to fit all 40 names on the screen at once without making you all strain so hard to read the screen that it gives you an aneurysm. So I'm going to only show you the top 20 finishers in each metric. Let's go ahead and start off with their 2-year average when we're looking at games played. Now, when we do that, we see 8 guys right here at the top that are averaging full game seasons. Some of them a little bit younger, right? Brian Thomas Jr., a really small sample size, but he was on the field all year last year. Same with Xavier Worthy. But we also got guys like Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Also had Marvin Harrison, a rookie last year, played all 17. And then Terry McLaurin as well, somewhat of a wide receiver Iron Man. But then we also have some guys super close to that 16.5, which means they've only missed 1 game over the last 2 years. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cortland Sutton, Drake London, Jamar Chase, Jerry Jeudy, Rashad Bateman, Tyreek Hill, and Zay Flowers. Lastly, 4 guys coming in here with a 16-game average. It's CeeDee Lamb, Jordan Addison, Khalil Shakir, and Landmines. Which means now it's time to go down to average targets per game. And right here at the top, we had 4 guys averaging double-digit targets. Malik Neighbors at the top of the list. And to see him up there in his rookie year is great, especially knowing that he has some improved quarterback play coming this year. But Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Davante Adams were all also over 10 targets per game. We had quite a few guys over 9 targets as well. Puka Nacua at 9.6. Drake London at 9.2, Higgins at 9.1, Garrett Wilson at 9, Justin Jefferson at 9. We had Chris Godwin at 8.9 prior to his injury. Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, DJ Moore, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jackson Smith-Njigba all averaged at least 8 targets per game as well. A couple guys that were verge 8, guys like Cortland Sutton, Mike Evans, and Brian Thomas Jr., guys that are really known for making the big play. They're able to put up some higher fantasy production despite a lower target share, just due to those big play abilities and that touchdown upside. But now, who can get open? Let's look at target separation. Right here at the top of the list, holy mother F balls. Rashee Rice, an average target separation of 2.34. That means last season, at the time of his targets, the closest defender was over 6 feet away. Now, a lot of that had to do with him being a part of that short passing game, but that number is elite. Anything over 2 is elite. Guys like DJ Moore, Khalil Shakir, Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy, and Jameson Williams, all over 2 yards of separation at the time of the target. Like I said, those numbers are redonkulous. They're huge. Guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashad Bateman, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Chris Godwin, and Devontae Smith over 1.8 yards of separation. We had guys like Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Downs, Wan'Dale Robinson, Tyreek Hill, and Chris Olave over 1.7 yards of separation. And then we round out the top 20 with 4 guys that averaged over 1.6 yards of separation. Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Jalen Waddle. How crazy is it that Chase and Jefferson are down here at 1.65 and 1.64? These are guys that rack up receptions, but that also tells me that they don't need a whole lot of room to make those catches. And that's why they're elite. Whether they're open or they're not, they're catching the football. Now, speaking of catches, let's look at drop rate, right? Because when we get targets, we can't afford to be dropping them. And we have 3 guys in the top 40 that did not drop the ball last year. Khalil Shakir, Chris Olave, and Terry McLaurin. Jordan Addison was right behind that, only 1%, followed by Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba, both of them 1.5% or lower. Then we get down to Chris Godwin, Tyreek Hill, Jacoby Myers, Ladd McConkey, Puka Nacua, all under 2% drop rate, which in my opinion is where the elite numbers are. But there were more guys that were super close, so it's not like they were that far off. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, Zay Flowers, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., DK Metcalf, and Nico Collins round out our top 20 overall wide receivers when we're looking at drop rates. But we want to keep the vibes positive around here, so let's assume that these guys caught the football. Now what are they going to do with it after they have it in their hands? Let's look at yards after the catch per reception. At the very top, 2 guys that are considered yak monsters. Jameson Williams, known for those big plays, and then Deebo Samuel, who always fights for that extra yardage. But how about number 3? When you think of yards after the catch per reception, are you really thinking Khalil Shakir? Probably not, but he remains one of the most underrated wide receivers in fantasy football. After him, Rashee Rice, again, the guy's name just continues to pop up. Chris Godwin, he was at 7 yards after the catch per reception prior to his injury. Xavier Worthy at 6'9". Puka Nacua, another guy always fighting for that extra yardage at 6'6", with Brian Thomas Jr. His had to do with so many big plays last year. He was at 6'5". Then we got guys like Zay Flowers, he's pretty shifty. Jamar Chase, known for big plays. DJ Moore, he's at 6 yards after the catch per reception, really something he's known for and has been known for his entire career. Davante Adams at 5'6". Josh Downs at 5'5", Nico Collins at 5'4", AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb both at 5'3", but then when we round out the top 20, there was 4 guys with at least 4.4 yards after the catch per reception. It was JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Ladd McConkey, Justin Jefferson, and Devontae Smith. So now let's move on to red zone targets. We're trying to find that touchdown upside. Look at Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Both of them had 30 plus red zone targets. Good Lord. Now, when I'm looking at red zone targets, I'm looking for a number of 17 plus. Why? That's an average of at least 1 per game. It's given me that opportunity that potentially they could score a touchdown weekly. Well, how many other wide receivers had that? We had a lot. Devontae Adams at 25, Drake London at 25, Justin Jefferson at 24, T. Higgins in a shortened season had 24, Garrett Wilson at 23, Cortland Sutton at 22, DJ Moore at 21, Xavier Worthy in his rookie year 18. How about Wan'Dale Robinson again? I have said his name numerous times. He had 18 red zone targets. Tyreek Hill at 18, and then Jordan Addison at 18 as well. But there were some other guys fairly close to that 17 number. Guys like Brian Thomas Jr. was 16, along with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. And then we had Malik Neighbors, Terry McLaurin, Jacoby Myers, and Mike Evans all at 15 red zone targets on the year. So now we've basically discussed the entire picture of bringing in the catch. Now, what did that equate to fantasy points per game? And here we go, the top 20 in this metric. At the top, it's Jamar Chase. Again, not a surprise. Remember, dude was the Triple Crown winner, the only wide receiver to average 20 plus fantasy points per game. In fact, he was the only one to average over 17 points per game. The next closest one was Chris Godwin, one of our must-have wide receivers last year. Really hate that he went down early with injury. He was on a crazy pace. Up there with Justin Jefferson at 15.6, T. Higgins at 15.5. Another name that we've seen quite a bit in a lot of these metrics, and a lot of people really haven't wanted much to do with him based off of injuries the last couple of years. Then we had Amon-Ra St. Brown at 15.2, Puka at 15.2, a couple guys just under 15, like Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Mike Evans, all 14.5 or higher, followed by Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Brian Thomas Jr., and AJ Brown, all over 14 fantasy points per game. And then we round out the top 20 with some super solid guys each and every week. Drake London at 13.6, Terry McLaurin at 13.3, Rashee Rice at 13.2, followed by Devontae Smith, Ladd McConkey, Jameson Williams, and Jordan Addison, who all scored over 12 fantasy points per game just last year. But now we want cheap. We know a lot of these guys are going to be expensive. So when we look at the top 40, who are the cheapest available options when we look at projected ADP for 2025? At the top of the list, it's Wan'Dale Robinson, currently the wide receiver 40 in drafts, followed by Rashad Bateman, who's the wide receiver 39, Josh Downs, Deebo Samuel, a huge discount this year for the potential upside of Deebo, Jacoby Myers, Khalil Shakir, he's at wide receiver 35, followed by Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, and Chris Godwin, all currently at wide receiver 30 or later. Then we go down to Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, and Devontae Smith, all wide receiver 25 or later. And then we round out the top 20 here with 4 guys that are currently inside the top 24 at their position: Zay Flowers, Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, and DJ Moore. Which gets us through all of our metrics. Now, before we reveal the final top 20 standings, if you're looking for even more info so you can straight dominate in 2025, you got to get yourself a draft guide. It's got cheat sheets, tier rankings, player profiles, sleepers, breakouts, busts, offensive line rankings, injury analysis, and so much more. Head over to tfhdraftguide.com and get yours right now. There's links down below in the description. But all right, let's go ahead and find out who our top 20 finishers were in today's exercise. And when we bring up this list, at the top of it was Chris Godwin. That just shows you the type of pace he was on prior to injury just last year. After him, another one of our more favorite wide receivers in 2024, it was Khalil Shakir. If these guys are on the field, they are great for your fantasy football team. Now, after him, the biggest stud finisher was Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think we can all look at Amon-Ra St. Brown and say he's pretty safe each and every year, followed by Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Jacoby Myers, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jamison Williams, Xavier Worthy, Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Brian Thomas Jr., Wan'Dale Robinson finished inside the top 20, along with Devontae Smith, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Garrett Wilson. But now we need to take this list and kind of narrow it down, right? We're trying to find the safest of the safe. So typically, we remove players that have gone to new teams or have a potential role change inside their offense. Now, when we do that, there's really two names to talk about. The first one is Davante Adams. He's no longer a New York Jet. Now he's gone to Los Angeles to be a part of the Rams. And while I don't hate that move, there's still a lot of unknown there. The other guy here is Xavier Worthy. Remember, he really benefited last year due to injuries to Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown, who both now look to be 100% healthy coming into the 2025 season. That could reduce the target share going the way of Xavier Worthy. So let's go ahead and remove those two guys from the list, since there's a little bit of unknown there, and see what that leaves us. Now, the next thing we like to look for is to identify the players that are coming off any injury of significance. If they're coming off a major injury, even though there's a chance they're 100% by week 1, there's always that potential for re-injury. The last thing we want to do is draft a guy coming off of something major and then expecting him to be safe. Remember, we're not trying to find the best guys, we're trying to find the safest guys. Well, there was two guys on this list that technically fit into this category. The first one, the top finisher, Chris Godwin. He had a dislocated ankle. It's an injury that forced him to miss over half the season. It's a major injury, but even though it sounds like he could be good to go, he is coming off that major injury, as well as Rashee Rice, who missed more than half a season with a torn LCL. Now, honestly, I still like both of these guys quite a bit in 2025, but can I consider them safe for the purpose of this show? No, probably not. So let's go ahead and remove them from the list as well. But now we need to move on to the obvious, and we mentioned this at the start of the show. You don't need a video telling you that Jamar Chase and Puka Nacua are good. So let's look at the projected round that these guys are going to be drafted in so we can get rid of some of these studs. We had Khalil Shakir in the 8th, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 1st, DJ Moore in the 4th round. Jamar Chase is a first rounder. Puka is a first rounder. Jacoby Myers in the 8th. Jackson Smith-Njigba in the 3rd. Jamison Williams in the 5th. Josh Downs in the 9th. Zay Flowers in the 5th. Brian Thomas Jr. is up inside the late 1st round. How about Wan'Dale Robinson, round 16? Dude is super late. Then we got Devontae Smith in the 5th. Justin Jefferson in the 1st. Jordan Addison in the 7th, and Garrett Wilson currently in the 3rd. So because you don't need to be told that players drafted inside the first 2 rounds are good, let's go ahead and remove all the guys whose ADP are within the first 2 rounds. Now, when you do that, it leaves you Khalil Shakir, DJ Moore, Jacoby Myers, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jamison Williams, Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, Wan'Dale Robinson, Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison, and Garrett Wilson. So do we think these guys have a chance at being safe in 2025? Let's go through each one. Khalil Shakir, highly underrated. Have loved him for multiple years here on this channel. He is the safest wide receiver option in the Buffalo passing offense right now, and it's really not that close. He deserves to be here. How about DJ Moore? He has a lot of competition for targets, but will have the highest target share on one of the most improved offenses in the NFL. And if you remember earlier in the show, one of the things he does so well is yards after the catch. So even if his target share is slightly lower, he can do more with what he gets. He deserves to be on the list, in my opinion. How about Jacoby Myers? Not a lot of options in Las Vegas, and he should lead this team in targets, which is going to make him a little bit safer. Not the highest ceiling, but a safe option for where he's being drafted in the 8th round. Then we have JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. The ultimate question is, what does Cooper Kupp have left in the tank? With his recent regression, though, Jackson Smith-Njigba should continue to be the #1 receiving option in Seattle, and he's currently got a 3rd round ADP. He deserves to be here. How about Jamison Williams? He's a little bit more big play dependent, but in this Detroit offense, he is going to get those chances routinely. Now, in my opinion, he may not be the safest weekly start, but definitely somebody who has one of the higher ceilings on the list. Then we have Josh Downs, and this one is all about quarterback play. We also have a new stud rookie tight end and other wide receivers in the mix in Indianapolis. I love the upside, but I'm just concerned that we really don't know what's happening at quarterback in Indianapolis, so Josh Downs may not be the safest remaining guy here. How about Zay Flowers? His biggest issue? Inconsistency. We saw that last year. Does that change in 2025? Probably not. He's more of a safer floor play than a higher ceiling, so he deserves to be safe, but I wouldn't be overly excited about relying on him weekly. Then we get to Wan'Dale Robinson, and I absolutely love the target share of Wan'Dale Robinson. Now he gets upgraded quarterback play, and we all know that Malik Neighbors is currently dealing with a toe issue. If he were to miss time, Wan'Dale Robinson's target share would go through the roof since they didn't add anyone else of any major value this offseason. Then we have Devontae Smith, really similar to Zay Flowers in my opinion. It's just hard to go through the up and down weeks so often. The ceiling is higher, the floor isn't bad, but it really plays with your emotions weekly. Which takes us down to Jordan Addison, a wide receiver that a lot of people forget about. Now, we have a new quarterback in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy, but all signs show that he will be more than capable in at least repeating what Sam Darnold did last year with the Vikings. I think he deserves to stay on this list for where he's being drafted in the 7th round. And then lastly, Garrett Wilson. Can Justin Fields feed him enough volume for him to thrive? Now, while that's a little bit questionable still, you have to think the floor for Garrett Wilson is at least 1,000 yards. He's been doing it every year with bad quarterback play. And if he can rack up a lot of shorter receptions, I would say that Garrett Wilson is pretty safe in 2025. Now, if I really had to pick my personal favorites here on this list, it's probably going to be DJ Moore, Jacoby Myers, Khalil Shakir, and Wan'Dale Robinson. Just remember, there's nothing wrong with focusing on a little bit of safety at times in fantasy football. So do yourself a favor. Live by this rule. Take one risk every 4 rounds of your fantasy football draft and just watch the success you have.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headline Nation.